Recently, the Ministry of Health announced a mass vaccination campaign against yellow fever for individuals aged 1 to 60 years across the 5 regions. The vaccination campaign, which commenced on April 2, 2024, targets regions including Kampala, Ankole, Moroto, Soroti and Masaka. The voluntary mass vaccination, including in schools, aims to curb the spread of yellow fever and its potential health impacts. However, questions raised regarding the legal basis for enforcing such vaccination campaigns by the Ministry of Health.
Generally, government has a duty to ensure that to do anything for the good order and well-being of its citizens. And among those obligations is to ensure that they receive health care, which includes vaccinations. There are a number of laws, because our constitution doesn't have expressly the right to health, but it's implied in other aspects, and then what some court decisions have interpreted of government's duty to ensure that its citizens and their welfare and well-being is catered for, including helping them prevent those diseases which can be avoidable. There are also other laws like the Public Health Act and the Immunization Act. We have the Immunization Act, which mandates that children of 1 year to 6 years, they should be vaccinated for particular diseases. In fact, it's mandatory, and it makes it criminal for any parent who refuses to immunize a child who is within that child that range of 1 year to 6 years. And then there are times when epidemics come, diseases which were not foreseeable earlier, like we saw COVID, and then the vaccine came up and it was an epidemic. And government, because the law says, the Immunization Act says that the minister can come up with a statutory instrument gazetting a particular disease for massive vaccination, like it was with COVID. So even in this case, when there's need to know that possibly yellow fever has come at a massive scale, for those children between 1 and 6 years, it's mandatory that they are immunized. But for those above, even adults, they can't do that without your consent. So even when the people who are vaccinating come to schools, they are supposed to seek the consent of the parents. Schools have a duty to seek the consent, possibly written, such that people don't change their words, written consent of the parents before their children are vaccinated. There are circumstances where even government has a duty to, a minister can seek to have people vaccinated compulsorily or mandatorily. But of course, we have not reached that, because even for COVID, they didn't reach the extent of having mandatory vaccination. So it's still consensual, even for children. Their parents have to give consent. And it generally derives from that mandate of government to ensure that its citizens are healthy and its citizens are safe.
Whereas the yellow fever vaccination is voluntary and requires parental consent for school children, some individuals remain hesitant, citing concerns over potential side effects of the vaccines.
Yes, it does, but it's for a good reason, because schools are collection centers of pupils, and it's easier to find children in schools than at their homes. It's even cheaper to administer them, because just imagine a school with 1,000 students coming from maybe 500 different places. So instead of going to their different homes, it's cheaper and more logical to have them performed at school and the vaccinated done there. So I think it's the most logical thing to do to ensure that schools cooperate in this as the biggest collection centers of students. It's the duty of the people vaccinating to ensure that, because ordinarily you're not supposed to administer medication or any form of medication by force, save for particular exceptions. So ordinarily you're not supposed to administer a vaccine by force or without the consent of the person. So it's, even if the parents are not aware that they should give consent, it should be the duty of the vaccinators, because for them they are health professionals, to advise them that we're supposed to require your consent before you're vaccinated.
In the event of adverse reactions to administered vaccines, who bears the accountability?
Because no one would carry the blame if there is no negligence done. If something goes wrong because of the way the vaccine was administered, not because of the vaccine itself, but maybe the vaccine was administered in a wrong manner or in a wrong dosage, that one you can hold the government or and its agent, the particular person, responsible. But if the wrong thing is as a result of the vaccine itself, then that one you can't hold anyone responsible, because Many times, even when you get treatment in hospital, you may die, you may react to it. You can't, because the overall issue is that it's done in good faith. So no one can know what can come out, because ordinarily those vaccines are tested over and over time. So by the time they start administering them, they have been approved that they are fit for human consumption for that purpose. So if something goes wrong, it can be an exception which you can't blame anyone for, unless the wrong thing is as a result of a negligence or an act negligently done in the course of administering. Still, it's a matter of evidence, because the question would be, what is the cause of the damage? Is it because of an expired drug, administering an expired drug? That one, government would be liable if you're administering an expired vaccine. But if the wrong thing is as a result of something what was within the vaccine that reacted maybe on particular individuals, then that one you can't blame the government, because the government is administering. These drugs are approved by even World Health Organization, which is a UN body, as fit for that purpose. So if it's something that goes wrong, maybe you could sue the company which manufactured the virus, but you'd need a lot of evidence to prove that your damage is directly as a result of this vaccine. Before those vaccines are administered, they go through rigorous testing processes. And even before, even locally, both internationally and locally, the Food and Drug Administration of the USA, the World Health Organization itself has to approve, because they go through rigorous tests and mechanisms. So by the time they flag it off to be used as a preventive measure, it has certainly gone through all the foreseeable scientific human tests. So if there is any harm as a result of that, it can be the exception, unless there is strong evidence which is shown that this particular vaccine causes this. Vaccines everywhere have side effects. All vaccines have side effects, just like many drugs have side effects. But the side effects many times don't measure up to the cost of preventing the disease. Sometimes, and they're temporary, they're never permanent. That's why many times when a vaccine causes permanent side effects, many times it's withdrawn from the market. So it wouldn't be a government of Uganda would also say in its defense that it's relying on the expertise of international bodies which have flagged off this vaccine as fit.
Given public apprehension about the vaccines used, there is a call for enhanced public education regarding the vaccines utilized in the campaign. However, not everyone shares this perspective.
I don't think there is need, because ordinarily, just like all other drugs, when people go for painkillers, when people go for pressure or high blood pressure drugs or diabetes drugs, they don't ordinarily are not given the ingredients of each and every drug. For some of these diseases which have been there for a long time, polio, yellow fever, their vaccines have been tested over and over again. So the debate on the types shouldn't arise, because by the time World Health Organization flags off a drug, it has gone through some bit of rigorous research.
Lawyer Judge Musi contends that public sensitization should precede any vaccination exercise.
I don't think so. I don't think the ministry has done enough, because we've not seen them engage, for instance, beyond some of the adverts. They should be beyond tapping on religious leaders, go to churches and mobilize people to ensure, first of all, create enough publicity for purposes of removing the biases against vaccines. There are people who have biases against vaccines or against drugs generally. So I don't think they have done enough. It's been a campaign of a few days, at least on the mainstream media, and we've not seen them enough showing reasons why this campaign and why at this time. That's why that sometimes when people come up with all sorts of bias against them, they're easily believed, because of those boxes that they've not done enough to explain why are you doing this and why at this time.
The yellow fever vaccination campaign started on 2nd April 2024 and is scheduled to conclude on 8th April 2024.